And so they said that the covenant held as the many battles were entered into between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. Sons of light. Light coming from the term enlightenment. The sons of light wishing same, wishing enlightenment. The sons of darkness gaining their name from the desire to obscure the truth of man's heritage. Sons of darkness on the side of the archangel. Keep man here, don't tell him who he is, we can play with him. Around midway through the second covenant, the battle became intense as the archangel extended its plan by showing the curious and dominant men the power of which is now known as magic. The archangel showed man magic. Man fell for this power, not realizing that it was the use of the very same power that they had before. The methods of invoking the magic were changed to appear as though they were earth powers. And as a side note, they say, you understand that the archangel now wanted man to stay here and hunger for those things of the earth. It also wanted man to think that the magic powers were coming from the earth, thus focusing their attention on the earth, outward, not inward. That way man would seek his power from without, from the earth, from this archangel's knowledge. Man would learn to seek outward, seek for the knowledge of magic from its source, the archangel's source. Seek it. Worship it. So you see the plan? And the worst thing about it was that here we've been trying to keep this ability to create and use the because they were calling it magic then, use those powers that they had at birth as a soul. Again, here everybody's trying to keep them from using it, and then the archangel says, get these people off the earth and get them out of here, and they're damaging, and then all of a sudden not all of a sudden because it was years and years, but about face, keep these souls here, give them magic if that's what it takes to keep them here. So then they go on and say, the plan was working, and the sons of light had their work cut out for them. How were the sons of light to counteract this new magic? These souls were too clever to just leave to their own devices. They would learn the new magic. They would teach the new magic. They would use the new magic. They would cause all manner of problems. These men, these wizards, these witches, were going to attempt to build a tower to God. They were going to build a circle of power and more. And as a side note, they say the mysteries of the monolith, the pyramid, and the light could well be explained by those clever monkey men desiring to build the very shapes of creation. And they say more in Book 5. The very shapes of creation? More in Book 5, I guess. They said they knew of the power lines of the elementals, the chakra, the symbols, the incantations, and more. Some caused death and destruction and gained the dominance of whole groups of people. The sons of light just couldn't let them go. They couldn't teach man who he really was, or man would go back to the condition of the first covenant. So here they are. They can't stop the magic from being taught by man now that the archangel taught one of them. It's going to be spread over mankind. They can't counteract that by saying, you've had those powers all along. You were a soul. You own those powers. It isn't earth magic. It isn't even magic. It's your ability. You can't tell them that because it would bring man back to the first condition, covenant, and the first covenant didn't work. So they said there must be a way. And there was. They go on and say, they call for the removal of the ability to use mental communication and to require the use of different tongues or languages in an effort to separate man. They hope that man might well feel the great loss of this new separation and thus remember and seek the togetherness of Father's love. Confusion and separation was needed here. That might stall the effort of man to learn their powers again. What do? They took mental communication away from man and gave him language. Sound like anything you've heard before? Sound like that part in the Bible about building the tower to reach God, and maybe warped in, maybe in go on and say, Tower of Babel. That's what I'm talking about in the Bible. Maybe that's just a definition of what was going on here. So then they go on and say they also call for the removal of those entities called wizards or warlocks or magicians or sorceresses or witches, and all those that had already discovered the hidden power. The method was beyond man's present ability to understand, but required a sweep of the entire earth, and all those that had power were removed. Of course, the archangel wasn't going to let its work go to waste without some advantage. It demanded that all who had the power be removed, good or bad, as it would be seen. There was no other way to gain that which was needed, and all were removed. What did they say? If you have any magic, any understanding of magic, you have to be taken off the earth. Okay, what about the good ones? Nope, they have to be taken off too. And that was an agreement. And then they side note again, say, for those who need to know, all save the ancient ones were banned to the fourth, and the levels there to play with their power. The ancient ones, and here they say not the first ancient ones, but the second group of ancient ones, refused to go, knowing the need on earth. They had tremendous power and were found to be very difficult to remove. In the end, the archangel tricked them. Enough would be said were we to say that they were ultimately trapped on a planet placed within a sphere. Man lost the ancient ones who had been such a help in earlier times. You have any idea what they're talking about there? I don't. Ancient ones trapped put in a planet and then placed inside a sphere. Put a planet inside a sphere? That's what it says here. Okay, so what they're going to do is take all of those that already knew the magic, that were already practicing it, and take them off the earth, move them to the fourth dimension, let them play in those houses, those boxes, those parts of the grid. That's what they were going to do. The ancient one says we're not going there, and they had enough power to enforce it. But somehow or other, the archangel managed to trick them and got them off the earth. So now we have the clean slate. So they go on and say, that was but one of the battles in that time, but one that may now be remembered somewhat. There was a removal, a time known as the 7 days of fire, not fire as we know it, not black fire, followed by the great flood, the end of the Ice Age, the loss of Atlantis, Exodus. All attempts to describe that event. So here they're saying that time of removal was also the time of the great flood, also the time of the end of the Ice Age, also the time of the loss of Atlantis. Exodus? Boy, everything I've read indicated that Exodus was at a much later time. They're saying that all of this happened during this time. See, this is one of the things that we always get into trouble with. I don't believe that. I don't believe Exodus was that time. I'm not positive they're talking about the Exodus, but that was my assumption, the Jewish Exodus from Egypt. But if they are, timeline doesn't work as we understand it. And, every time I call them on these things, they say, just wait. You'll come to an understanding of it as you continue to read and study and learn. So, in Atlantis, by the way, they did just so great flood we know about. What about Atlantis? The loss of Atlantis during that time, and Exodus during that time. So, if it's the Bible Exodus, it doesn't seem to fit any timeline that I understand, but I can see the flood and the end of the Ice Age and the loss of Atlantis. I can see all those happening at that one time, because most historians say that the flood was much more recent than the end of the Ice Age was 13,000 years ago, give or take. And they don't feel that the flood was during that time. It was much later. But here they are, the we that give me this information, saying the end of the Ice Age, the great flood, the loss of Atlantis, and Exodus were all in that cleansing the earth, fire and then water. And they go on and say there was the battle of the archangels and the replacing of the earth guardian. There was a battle in our very heavens with Mars and Venus playing a major role, and the dragon, serpent, the fire in the heavens, disrupting all. Enter Satan. Too much for here, Book 5. As the second cycle of the 25,000 plus year came to an end, in our own historic time, things were again a mess, and the third covenant was called for. Now here they have this just short little paragraphs where they throw book after book of, if they'd only said it. What do you mean the loss of Atlantis? Was it Atlantis? Did we lose it? Was it Atlantis? What was it? How big was it? Was it a little Mediterranean island, or was it, half of the Atlantic Ocean? What was it? Who were they? No information. End of the Ice Age, no information. Great Flood, no information. Exodus, no information. And going on, Battle of the Archangels and the replacing of the Earth Guardian. Replacing of the Earth Guardian and enter Satan. They replaced the Earth Guardian, and there was a battle in heaven with Mars and Venus playing a major role, and the dragon, the serpent, the fire in the heavens disrupting all. What are they talking about here? And this is 13,000 years ago, give or take. And now the third covenant was called for. So they said, and that's the name of the next chapter too, the third covenant. And they go on and say, as we said, it was obvious that the archangel was not in agreement with the second covenant and began to undermine its objectives. Now this archangel had been overthrown and replaced by one who did truly love the worship of the soul projections now entering man. The need here then was for the fallen one, this new caretaker of the earth, to become a god in its own right. What I wonder it would be to have these very children of Father worshiping it. No way to compete with Father as the God of love. All souls would know Father to be the topmost God of love. What was left? Could it be the God of evil? The antithesis of love? Was that the answer? That was the course. There you are. The antithesis of the God of love. This Satan, this guardian of the earth, this caretaker. And they say, what a mess. As a side note, there's even more complication as other groups realized that something was going on here in this tiny speck of the universe, which was a tiny speck of the shadow portion of the grid of creation. Thus, to this day, the watchers and those who would enter into the affairs of man. What a mess. What did they say? They throw so many things in here, it's almost too much. Here enters Satan 13,000 years ago. Here he is, the antithesis of love. Here he is, really wanting the worship of those soul enterings into the monkey man. Here he is overthrowing the caretaker of the earth himself somehow, and getting in there and saying, okay, now you're going to worship me, I'm the God of evil. And of course you got this terrible mess. Then you throw on top of that what did they say listen to this. Let's listen to how they view this. You want to talk about different views of things. There was even more complications. Other groups of what? Other groups realized that something was going on here in this tiny speck of the universe, which was a tiny speck of a shadow portion of the grid of creation. A tiny speck of the shadow portion of the grid of creation. The shadow portion. And then they say, thus to this day the watchers and those who would enter into the affairs of man. Thus to this day there are watchers and those others who would enter into the affairs of man. Why? Because they saw something was going on here. So now not only do you have the caretaker having been overthrown and Satan taking his place, being the caretaker of the earth, but you also have these other things, whatever they are, entering into the affairs of man. Because why? Because something's going on here. Okay, so then they go on and say, in a time close to 500 BC, there was a sending of those who would bring enlightenment to man as a precursor to Christ and the start of the third covenant. At a time close to 500 BC, and if you check your religions of the world, almost all of them, the beginning of them started about 600 BC. I checked that out. That's true. So it goes on and says, in timing, this covenant was to start roughly 500 AD, but the preparation for same was to begin much sooner. With the archangel and its minions, now the adversary, a deal was struck and the third covenant was instituted. The sons of light called for and this is what they instituted. The sons of light called for the locking of the earth system to all souls who would try to enter. That would put an end to the influx of new souls, since each new soul just compounded the problem. Earth is locked from any new soul coming here and the possibility of them becoming entrapped. That was the first thing they asked for. The second thing they asked for, they also asked for the restriction of all but the soul's projections from entering physically, and they emphasize physically, on earth. There would be no more angels, no more gods, no more higher powers to answer the summons. No help could come physically to any one on earth anymore. They were not going to allow physical manifestations of anything but man. No more angels, no more gods, no more higher powers, no more calling the higher powers, which is what a lot of magic was. I'm going to do this incantation, I'm burn this incense on, and I'm going to call higher powers. Didn't do any good because they couldn't come physically anymore. I mean, I won't say it wouldn't do any good, but they didn't come physically anymore. And so they go on and say, oh, there would be influences. They would come in the form of small voice, the hunch, the flash of an idea, channeling, but no more would man see the forms of those not man on earth anymore. They wouldn't see those forms. No angels, no devils, no evil things, not in a physical form. You might see them in your imagination, you might dream of them, you might this, that, but no more would they walk among men, as long as this covenant held. So they go on and say, with the summoning of those no longer possible, all magic would soon fall as a means of power, since it no longer worked. In other words, you couldn't summon those in physical form, so that's the end of magic. It wouldn't take you long to figure out that magic wasn't working. And how long would it be before the material science took the place of magic as a means of control on earth? Their question. How long would it be before the material science took the place of magic? And that's what they're saying. So then they go on and say, as we said, they called for the removal of all who were not man, as it could be called, but with one exception. There was to be a special soul chosen by the sons of light who would enter the earth influence every 2,000 years. And that's not locked, it's kind of give and take. It's kind of 2,000 some odd years. And it says that special soul was to teach those that were trapped here in the earth system, or explain really this covenant that they had, the third covenant. And I guess they'll go on and explain what this covenant entailed, but you have one special person entering the earth system to kind of be the forerunner and explain what the covenant was all about. That was the exception. And then as a side note, they say the covenant called for the prevention of any soul from entering the system, and also the prevention of any soul now entrapped here in Earth's influence from leaving the system until they had to earn the right to leave. there would be no more recruiting the sheep at Father's very throne. That ploy, discovered by the Sons of Light, was a part of the overall plan to get the sweet and innocent sheep and keep them here on earth for the pleasure of it, which was the archangel that took over, the caretaker, and its minions, those that were on its side. So, in other words, they found out that the minions of it were recruiting the sheep right at Father's very throne. They were going on saying, wow, yeah, come over to Earth. It's really cool, You got to see this. Man, this is worth going and seeing. And in they come. So they said, all right, that's it. Close the gate. You cannot enter into the Earth's system, no new soul. And those souls that were already here were going to learn and learn and learn, and they weren't going to get out until such time as they qualified by having learned what it is you have to learn. So that's what they said there, that they figured out what was going on, put a lock on that. And so then they go on, they were talking about this special soul that was going to be allowed to enter, and the only thing that was going to be allowed to enter. And so what they said was this special soul would open the gate and free those who called upon his name. Those left were given a gift of the seed of their salvation, as it were, and left to grow their freedom or not, as they saw fit. For the next 2,000 years, those who were not freed were left with reincarnation, karma, death, and those seeds. As before, those who were tickled or dominion bent remained to play until perhaps a new seed took hold in their consciousness and they too were released. So what they're saying is that the special soul came and opened the gate and freed those that called upon his name. Now you know who we're talking about. We're talking about Christ here. The first one was Christ, and he said, if you call upon my name, and that wasn't really what it was either. It was, if you understand what it was that I said and you accept it on faith, you can get out. Which is maybe how you would say, call upon my name. If you call upon my understanding, if you understand what it is that I'm saying, you can get out. That's what they said.